We're back for Season 2. Here are 3 things on the rundown. First, the Dallas Mavericks and their season recap as they got to the NBA Finals. We're going to take a look at how they improved from the season before. Then we have a league-wide update because we got some of the same faces in new places. And we're going to see who's going to be in the mix this season. And finally, we're going to take a look at the NBA's new rule change and the tip-off schedule. Y'all ready? Let's go. What's going on, guys? Welcome to Season 2 of The Control Room. I'm so excited to get into this NBA season. This looks like it's going to be an incredible one. I also have some new things for you. I started building a graphics package. So now I got some stuff to show you if you're on video. If you're on audio, don't worry. I'll make sure that I explain everything as it's happening. But let's get right into it. The Mavs season recap. First, it starts and ends with Luka Dončić, and here's why. These are Luka's season numbers in the regular season and the playoffs. In the regular season, he averaged 33.9 points per game, 48.7% from the floor, 38.2% from three, 9.2 rebounds per game, 9.8 assists per game, and 21 triple-doubles. He also shot 78.6% from the floor, and he had 1.4 steals per game. He had career highs in points per game, three-point percentage, assists per game, free throw percentage, steals per game, and triple-doubles. And by the way, he was the 2023-24 NBA scoring champion. For the playoffs, he averaged 28.9 points per game, 44.6% from the floor, 32.2% from three, 9.5 rebounds per game, 8.1 assists per game, and 7 triple-doubles, becoming the 6th player in NBA history to lead a team in points, rebounds, and assists entering the NBA Finals. And he had the second most triple-doubles in a single postseason in NBA history behind Nikola Jokic's 10 in 2023 when the Denver Nuggets won the NBA championship. Now let's take a look at Luka's milestones that he hit last season because there were a lot of them. All right, check this out. He scored his 10,000th career point on Christmas Day in Phoenix, scored 73 points in Atlanta on January 26th, which was tied for the 4th most points in NBA history. He set an NBA record with 6 straight 30-point triple-doubles. The previous record was 5, held by Russell Westbrook. And by the way, Luka finished his streak with 7 straight 20-point triple-doubles. And he ended up being the only player in NBA history to average 33, 9, and 9, which allowed him to finish 3rd in MVP voting. Now, Luka Dončić is, of course, the reason the Mavericks made the NBA Finals, but there were so many improvements across the board, and we're going to take a look at 5 different categories as to why the Mavericks were better from 2022-23 to 2023-24. Take a look at this. In 2022-23, the Mavericks had 38.8 rebounds per game, a three-point rate of 48.7%. They scored only 42.8 paint points per game, 11 fast break points per game, and had only 3.7 blocks per game. The following season, though, they had 42.9 rebounds per game. They shot a three-point rate of 44.1%. They scored 47.4 paint points per game, 15.8 fast break points per game, and they had 5 blocks per game. So a lot of those key categories, specifically 3 of them, rebounding, paint points, defense. Who can you attribute that to? Well, the Mavs did draft a rookie last year in Dereck Lively II, and his emergence is one of the reasons why the Mavericks went as far as they did. Let's take a look at Dereck Lively II. The Mavs' potential starting lineup for 2024-25 features him as the starting center. You have Luka as the point guard, Kyrie as the shooting guard, D-Live as the center, PJ Washington at the power forward, and then at the 3, our new guy, Klay Thompson. Now, this is a different starting 5 than what was there at the end of last season, mainly because Derrick Jones Jr. is no longer on the Mavericks. The starting 5 for 2023-24 since March 7th of Dončić, Irving, Derrick Jones Jr., Washington, and Gafford, they were 28-10 in the regular season and the playoffs. Since their first start together March 7th versus Miami, they went 13-9 in the playoffs, and they started every playoff game together. So this is a little bit different seeing D-Live in the center position. It might not be how it's going to play out the rest of the season, but for now, because of the growth of Dereck Lively II and the potential to see him already there at the season opener is a pretty good sign of where the Mavericks can go. And it doesn't mean that Gafford's going to lose minutes. He's still a pivotal piece to that center rotation. So these two guys are going to be competing against each other, but also helping the team, fortifying the rim protection, all the blocking, the rebounding, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I want to go through some stats with you. There's no graphic for this, but I want to lay out all these stats for Dereck Lively. He shot 16 of 16 from the floor in the Western Conference Finals, which was the most field goals made without a miss in a series in NBA playoff history. I mentioned this note as we were recapping the playoffs back in the summertime, but I just wanted to bring that back up. He shot 64 of 95. The percentage was 67.4% from the floor in the 2024 playoffs. That was the best field goal percentage by a rookie on 50 or more field goal attempts. The next best was Nick Collison with Seattle in 2005. That was at 60.7%. D-Live is at 67.4%. So he was much better than the next best guy. That is how good D-Live was when he was on the floor in the playoffs. And he became the second player ever. This is more of a fun note. He became the second player ever to make his first career three-pointer in the NBA Finals. If you remember Game 4 when Jayson Tatum gave him that stink eye, like, since when could you make threes? Dereck Lively has played point guard in his basketball life. He has a bit of a shooting stroke. So to see it come out of nowhere, at least if you weren't paying attention, is quite surprising. Could he do more of that? I don't think the Mavs are expecting him to, but it could be very interesting for the Mavericks down the line if he develops that kind of a shot more consistently. Also, the last person to do it, the only other person to do it, was Josh Powell, who used to play for the Mavericks. He did it for the Lakers in Game 1 of the 2009 NBA Finals versus Orlando. Neat note there. Back to D-Live. His playoff plus-minus finished at a plus 98. That's quite high for the amount of games that they played. It was the second best plus-minus by a rookie in NBA playoff history. You know who's first? Manu Ginobili. In 2003, he was a plus 191 with San Antonio. And they won the NBA championship that year. Then Dereck Lively at plus 98. And then in third, Chet Holmgren with OKC at plus 75. So Dereck Lively was one of the biggest reasons as well. Of course, there's Luka Dončić, but having D-Live in there when you were sorely missing that kind of presence in the paint, on the glass, and then to fortify that with Daniel Gafford was icing on the cake for this finals run. So having him in the starting lineup means that there's a chance that he could be there to finish games. And when you want your best players to finish games because of certain situations such as clutch time. I want to show the Mavericks in the clutch in the last two seasons. All right, so the Mavericks in the clutch the last 2 years, in 2022-23, they had 8.8 points per game, shot 42.1% from the floor, 28.4% from three, 72.5% from the free throw line, and their record was 26-29 in the clutch. The following season, 9.4 points per game, 47.5% from the floor, 36.8% from three, 85.5% from the stripe, and a 23-9 clutch record. The second best record in the NBA behind the LA Lakers, 24-9. Again, having D-Live in the starting lineup, finishing games, That is another factor. Another factor is the fact that the Mavs were just better in the clutch. They had a better team, so that was natural, but to execute in the clutch can make or break your season, let alone a single game. Now, it's not just D-Live that's the changing of the guard in terms of how well the Mavericks have improved from season to season. I mentioned Klay Thompson in that starting lineup. The Mavs brought in more than just him. Here are the new kids on the block. The additions: Quentin Grimes, traded from Detroit. Klay Thompson, traded from Golden State in a sign-and-trade. Najee Marshall, signed in free agency. He spent last season with the New Orleans Pelicans. And then Spencer Dinwiddie, also signed in free agency, former Maverick, who was in that trade for Kyrie Irving. Dinwiddie spent last season with Brooklyn and then with the LA Lakers. And then some notable departures: Josh Green, traded to Charlotte as part of the Klay Thompson trade. Tim Hardaway Jr. traded to Detroit, where the Mavs got back Quentin Grimes. And then Derrick Jones Jr. signed with the LA Clippers in free agency. So now that we know pretty much who's on this team, do the Mavericks have enough? We're going to have to see the rest of the NBA. Personally, I think they're one of the best teams in the West. But this is a different season, as every season is. So let's take a look at some NBA updates and check out some of the same faces in new places. All right, we got some movement around the league, so let's take a look at some of the same faces moving to some new places. Here's some of the big trades that happened in the offseason. Mikal Bridges was traded from Brooklyn to the New York Knicks. Then DeMar DeRozan went from Chicago to Sacramento in a 3-team sign-in trade. And probably the biggest trade that's happened all offseason: Karl-Anthony Towns traded from Minnesota to the New York Knicks in a 3-team trade. Now here's part 2. We've got some free agents that moved around. Paul George left the Clippers and went to the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, he has a bone bruise in his left knee, so he will miss the season opener on Wednesday night. Then Kentavious Caldwell-Pope left Denver and went to Orlando. That might hurt Denver a little bit more than it would help Orlando, but this is big for Denver's rotation. And then Isaiah Hartenstein left the New York Knicks and signed with Oklahoma City, and basically filled their one weakness that they had all season. But now Isaiah Hartenstein has a broken left hand, and he will be out for the first month of the NBA regular season. Now, there are some other big trades that happened, as well as some free agency signings, but they're all point guards. And I decided to put them on their own graphic, so check this out. DeJounte Murray was traded from Atlanta to the New Orleans Pelicans. Chris Paul was waived by the Golden State Warriors and then signed with the San Antonio Spurs in free agency. So now he's going to be lobbing to Victor Wembanyama. Russell Westbrook was with the Clippers last season, but was traded to Utah and then waived. Then he signed with Denver in free agency. And then Tyus Jones was with Washington last season. He signed with Phoenix on a 1-year deal and will now be the true point guard that the Suns needed to facilitate an offense between Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal. So who's in the mix? We're going to have to take a look at the standings from last season to get a clearer picture, although it's not going to be for every team. We're going to talk a little bit more about that on the other side. But first, let's take a look at the Western Conference standings. There were 5 50-plus win teams in a conference for the first time in the last 5 seasons. Of course, you had OKC leading the way, followed by Denver and then Minnesota, and then the LA Clippers in the top 4. The Mavericks won the Southwest Division and got the 5th spot. The Phoenix Suns got the last playoff spot, and then in the play-in, you had New Orleans, the LA Lakers, Sacramento Kings, and Golden State Warriors from 7 to 10, respectively. And then missing the playoffs, Houston was the only team that had somewhat of a chance near the end of the season to make the play-in, but they missed out at 11. And then Utah at 12, Memphis at 13 with all the injuries they had, San Antonio at 14, and then Portland at 15. Now let's take a look at the East. This is the first time that the Eastern Conference has had a 60-plus win team in the last 5 seasons, starting off with the Boston Celtics at 64-18. The next best team was the New York Knicks, only 14 games back from them. Then at third, the Milwaukee Bucks, who won the Central Division, they lost the number 2 spot on the last day of the season. Then they're followed by Cleveland at the 4 spot. The Orlando Magic won the Southeast Division at number 5. There was a 3-team tie between Orlando, Indiana, and Philly. And so it laid out Orlando at 5, Indiana at 6, Philadelphia at 7. Then to finish off the play-in, you had Miami at 8, Chicago at 9, Atlanta at 10, and then the 5 teams missing out in the Eastern Conference playoffs, Brooklyn at 11, Toronto at 12, Charlotte at 13, Washington at 14, and the Detroit Pistons with a 14-68 record at 15. Not very fun. So who's in contention? Philly? New York? Dallas? OKC? Maybe Denver? Let's take a look at the 5 teams I just mentioned. Philly has some health issues with Joel Embiid and Paul George. Health is going to be the main concern of this team as it was a season ago. That will dictate how the Sixers finish the regular season, and it'll determine how deep of a playoff run they have. For New York, they still have some new pieces in Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns. It's going to take a little bit of time for them to gel. I would give it about 20 games just to see where they are. But based on those the caliber of those players, I should say, I think that team is going to be fine in terms of where they are in the Eastern Conference. They should be top 4. Dallas got better from their NBA Finals team. Klay Thompson coming in, basically replacing Tim Hardaway Jr. if you consider salaries at $17 million annually for 3 years. No disrespect to Hardaway, but you would rather have a 4-time champion in Klay Thompson, who's also the second greatest shooter of all time, on your team. And then Najee Marshall coming in for Derrick Jones Jr., Quentin Grimes coming in as well as a good reserve unit. You now have options, combinations. Jason Kidd is going to have fun trying to get this team to work together. There's still going to be a bit of time trying to get all those pieces to work and gel, but the Mavericks on paper are better than they were a year ago. OKC. If these 2 teams, Dallas and OKC, match up in the playoffs, OKC is going to be a much harder out this time around, mainly because they brought in Isaiah Hartenstein, who eliminated the weaknesses that OKC had last season. Rebounding, second chance points, defending the glass. OKC really needed a presence at the rim that was more than Chet Holmgren, and they got it in one guy. And they were able to sign for him. They had the cap room to sign him. On top of that, they traded away Josh Giddey and got back Alex Caruso, who's a champion with the LA Lakers, played with LeBron James, Anthony Davis. He is an all-defense player. And because of how he's able to facilitate an offense, how he's able to play off the ball, how he's able to defend on the perimeter, he is a great pickup as well. So OKC might be the best team in the West, in my eyes. And then Denver lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, but they did bring back Aaron Gordon. They still have Jokic. They've got Jamal Murray signed to a long-term extension and Michael Porter Jr. It's going to take some of those other pieces that are there to step up and fill the holes that were left behind by KCP and Bruce Brown the year before. For them, it's really going to take effort. They just have to play with the hunger and the drive that they did 2 seasons ago. And Michael Malone is hopefully going to get that out of them. But as of right now, he's not sure if it's there, which is a little bit worrisome. Now, all those teams I mentioned, they're going to be contenders in their respective conferences. But to win an NBA title, there's only one problem. The Boston Celtics exist. We got to take a look at their efficiency numbers from 2023-24, not just the regular season, but the playoffs. In the regular season, Boston had an offensive rating of 122.2, which was first in the NBA. Their defensive rating was 110.6, which was second in the NBA, and their net rating was 11.7, which was by far the best net rating in the NBA. And then in the playoffs, they finished 16-3 en route to an NBA record 18th title. Their net rating was 8.6, which was first in the NBA, and they finished top 4 in offense and defense among all 16 playoff teams. So why do I say Boston? Why do I think Boston is the team to beat still? Because we've had different champions for the last 6 years. Boston's bringing almost everyone back. 13 players back, at least. Including the dynamic duo of Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I want to take a look at their numbers from the 2024 NBA Finals against the Mavericks. Jayson Tatum averaged 22.2 points per game, shot only 38.8% from the floor, had 7.8 rebounds per game, 7.2 assists per game, and 1 steal per game. Jaylen Brown scored 20.8 points per game, shot 44% from the floor, averaged 5.4 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game, and 1.6 steals per game. Now, Tatum and Brown are the two biggest reasons as to why Boston has the best chance at winning the 2025 NBA title. For them to repeat, they brought back almost everybody, 13 players, like I just mentioned. The teams in the West and the teams in the East, although they got better, they might provide more of a challenge. In a 7-game series, I still think Boston has a better matchup no matter what, no matter who they play. And because of that, that's why I see them winning another title back-to-back for the first time since the Warriors did it in 2017 and 2018. So for now, Boston's going to be my pick to win it all. We need to see how the rest of the league performs over the next 20 games. Do I think any team will give them a run for their money? Maybe a couple, but we gotta figure out how the rest of the league is performing by then. Now that we've taken care of who might win it all, let's take a look at an NBA rule change when it comes to Coach's Challenge and a look at the NBA tip-off schedule. If you've made it this far, welcome to the post game. I want to show some love to some of the hardware winners of the last 12 months. Let's start off with Luka Dončić winning the NBA scoring title and the Western Conference Finals MVP. And then LeBron James, the NBA Cup MVP, the inaugural NBA Cup MVP back when it was the in-season tournament. And the 2024 Paris Olympics MVP. And then Jayson Tatum. He won the NBA championship last season and the 2024 Olympic gold medal with LeBron James and Team USA in basketball as well. LeBron James scored his 40,000th career point March 2nd, so that is a record in and of itself, on top of the fact that he had already passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar the season before. Now, there's a new rule you might want to be aware of when it comes to coaches' challenges and out-of-bounds violations. There was an example of Minnesota and Dallas when Kyrie Irving was able to dislodge the ball from Jaden McDaniels' hands, and McDaniels was the last person to touch it. So although the referee had signaled Minnesota ball, Jason Kidd challenged the call, and because there was no foul called, they couldn't retroactively call one. The referees said it is Dallas ball because the ball went off of Jaden McDaniels. Now they can retroactively call a foul in that situation. So here's the official quote from the NBA's press release. If instant replay of an out-of-bounds violation is triggered by a coach's challenge, the on-court officials and replay center will be able to review the video to determine whether a foul proximate to the violation should have been called. So I think this is a welcome ruling, especially because the rule was somewhat abused last season. Now we're not going to have this confusion as to who the ball should have been awarded to, whether or not a foul should have been called. That is all out the window with this ruling. Now that that's there, we don't have to worry about it. Now let's take a look at the NBA tip-off schedule for the rest of the week. Thursday, October 24th, the Mavericks have their season opener at home. The San Antonio Spurs come into Dallas and will play at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on TNT, followed by the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Denver Nuggets at 10 p.m. Eastern on TNT. And then Friday, October 25th, the Indiana Pacers will play the New York Knicks in a conference semifinal rematch at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN, followed by the Suns against the Los Angeles Lakers at 10 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. So that does it for me. Thanks for being here. Make sure to download this episode, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And we'll see you next time. Let's hit the rollout.